Good morning, everyone. So I used to work in the tech space about 15, 20 years ago. After studying in the US, I worked at Amazon.com in the fairly early years of it. It was still a pretty scrappy startup. Then I've been a tech entrepreneur for quite a while. And over the last decade, I've been more in leading digital transformations across different sectors. So my point being, I'm still fairly new to healthcare. I joined Novartis about 18 months ago, close to a couple of years ago now. Still learning a lot from it, but it has been a hell of a ride, and I think a space that is becoming quickly incredibly interesting. I always go back to the why. Why joining a space like that one? And I think it goes back a bit to the point that the person from Atomico was making earlier, is like join big spaces, join spaces that really matter. And in this case, I was attracted by the fact that it's a space that often takes 15% of the GDP on some of the most countries across the planet, with real challenges that are becoming incredibly complex in terms of aging of the population, in terms of budget allocation to it, in terms of how do we serve patients in very different ways, especially as technology is coming across now. There is also a very emotional side to this industry. There is a sense of purpose. We're based here in Basel, an hour away from here. And you can sense when you walk around on our campus the sense of pride, of purpose, with 6,000 pure scientists whose life will be dedicated to try to find the next molecule. And actually, who most won't even find anything for their entire life. But the contribution of all of them together, of all of us together, brings to something quite unique. Now, we often talk about some of the biggest miracles, and I think this is well suited this year being the 50th years anniversary of the moon landing, which clearly is one of the biggest endeavor that mankind has taken in many ways. But I would argue that what has happened in healthcare over the past century is probably a bigger miracle. Life expectancy a century ago was below 40 years old. It means that, I'm hardly seeing, but it means that many of us would be just at the cusp. And now we are hitting 80 years old in most countries. But we still have a lot of puzzles that are completely unresolved. We still have 90% of diseases that we haven't cracked, that we don't really fully understand as part of it. So that's the endeavor, that's a big what if that we're taking on. What if we could cut our time to get our drugs to market? What if we could re-engineer CAR T cells, which is starting to become a reality right now, taking cells away from patients and re-injecting in their body, having been re-engineered from at the very basis of the DNA code. What if we could completely rethink the way that we do drug hunting and getting more in silico models to help us as well as part of it? All this is starting to become a reality. What if we could go to patients in a very different way and giving different access to the medicines that we have? What if we could reimagine even the way that healthcare is being done in the first place? So those are the questions that certainly get many of us up at night and get us to go to work every single day. Now, we are fortunate that we live in a time of incredible convergence. And I would say maybe before, one thing that I've certainly learned over my last 18 months is how much biology can be very humbling. You think you get it, you think that you'll come with a tech angle to it and that you can crack many of those problems. But unfortunately, it's way more complex than that. Just the sheer nature of biology, the sheer nature of computational power that is needed, the lack of understanding of many of the rules of biology in the first place and even of chemistry makes it actually quite a challenge. But we are fortunate to live in that time of convergence where you get technology, data, and science starting to really come close to each other. A really unique time, quite frankly. A few big numbers. We have the 63,000 searches happening on Google every single second. That's a lot of patients. That's a lot of loved ones. That's a lot of healthcare practitioners trying to understand what's happening with them and trying to understand the disease. 69% of the media time ends up being spent on mobile. And I can tell you, on the healthcare space, we don't think enough about that. Many of you naturally do, are born that way, have that natural mindset. But that helps not only reshape the experiences for patients, but also it starts putting power in the hands of patients as opposed to being the healthcare practitioners being the only one having the full knowledge and the full information. Apple is starting to really crack the code, at least make a dent on the Apple Health record, so that in some states in the US, you start having your own data in your pocket, on your device, wherever you decide to go, in whatever payer, whatever insurer, whatever hospital system you want to go, with rights for yourself to decide what you want to share as well as part of that. What kind of imaging are you willing to share? What kind of scan do you want to share as well with your practitioners that are behind? I think that completely reshaped the way that we think about this space. And compared to 50 years ago, at the time of the moon landing, we have 1 trillion times the computational capacity to really take on some of those challenges. So at Novartis, we are aiming to reimagine medicine powered by data and digital. It's one of our key focus areas. Essentially, it's pretty simple. There are 4 areas of focus that we have. The first one is 12, what we call 12 lighthouses. Those are 12 fairly ambitious mega programs that we're taking on, that we have funded as an executive committee quite substantially. We have prioritized a lot of other activities to be able to fund those. A lot of those are going to span over the next 2-3 years, but getting our data in good order, getting our architecture in good order, rethinking the way we go to patients, those are 12 that are in play right now and making good progress in scaling. Number 2 is we want to make our place digital. And that means it's the culture itself, but it's also investment into data, investment into data scientists. I think we are starting to be able to attract some of the very best of the world. Many guys from Google, from IBM, from Amazon have been joining us as part of that team. We're going to announce some pretty bold partnership fairly soon in that type of space. And at the same time, we are reshaping our organization so that we make it easier for all the guys in the countries to be able to do digital much more easily. Number 3 is important to me, and that's partly the reason we are here, is I fundamentally believe that we cannot do this alone. And we have an aspiration to be number 1 in the tech ecosystem in our space in healthcare, but we recognize as a starting point that there are many areas where many of you, many partners, are much better than we are as well in the topics, in creating patient communities, in specialist advance in reading of imaging, for example, etc. And we want to combine that together. And we have, for that purpose, created what we call the biome, which is a bridge between the industry and partners who can help us on that journey. And finally, number 4, we're also making a few bolder moves. China is a great example. If you get the chance to experience the healthcare system over there, it is incredible what is happening over there. We talk a lot about what Amazon is doing with Berkshire Hathaway. We talk a lot about Google's investment in healthcare. But go to China and see what Tencent, see what Ping An are doing. It is incredible. They are just reimagining the way that telemedicine can be used for rural areas, combined with insurance and can be priced in real time, combined with new experiences for patients and totally different type of access, using technology for that. Partnership with the likes of Babylon and others to really get AI being able to do triage and first diagnostic very rapidly in there as well. So we're investing in those type of spaces, and we have partnership with those guys. I'll spend the next few minutes to really go through concrete examples of what we do day in, day out across the space, in the way we innovate, in the way we engage with our patients, and in the way we operate as well. This is, on the research side, one of the investments we are making in the underlying data that we have. We are sitting on 2 million patient years of clinical trial data. If you know the space, this is an incredible trove and a goldmine of data that we have around patients, the hundreds of thousands of patients that go through our clinical trials every year, longitudinally, from genomic data, from proteomic data, from phenotypic data, linked to the outcome data of what happened to them as well in real life and in the real world. So we are orchestrating all of our data. We have 200 people on this to really being able to make sense of it, to understand how we can stratify patients differently, who are most benefiting from the drugs that we have to offer. To understand disease evolution, like melanoma, how do you understand how those diseases are progressing over time much better with proper digital endpoints and data? To understand generative chemistry, and I think we have a professor from ETH in the room as well who has been leading that space for the last 25 years, but clearly this is meant to be a computational challenge, augmenting what some of our smartest scientists can do in that space, building knowledge graph, etc. But there will be many probably applications very quickly that we are starting to find already on the back of that, finding new drugs, even finding drugs that we already have, but that can be hitting other very important diseases. At the same time, we are running 500 clinical trials at any point in time. This is one of the largest operations in the world in terms of number of trials being run. And quite candidly, up to a few years ago, this was done very locally, in local machines, on PDF, on Excel sheets, with the data not talking to each other. So we took that on to just bring that together under a single control tower, so that now 3,500 people among Novartis who work on that every day can get to see where their trials are at. Are we at risk of being behind? Predictively, what do we need to do to adjust, to recruit patients differently, to help patients to get the right lab supply at the same place? Big endeavor. And this is not stock photo. This is the way that we were inspired more by some of the electricity companies and some of the airline companies of how they manage their control tower and trying to apply the same into our space. Clearly, it's about patients. I don't know if you know that, but only 5% of eligible patients in oncology get access to trials nowadays. It means we're missing 95% of potential patients who should be on trials or should be eligible at least to get some help who are not getting access to it. A lot of reasons for those, but one of the reasons is simply getting access. It's the distance when you're sick or for your loved ones to have to drive 200 kilometers to get to a specialist center. It's not being well enough to be able to get out of your bed as well to go where you need to be on that. Technology can help. Bring telemedicine, sensors, the right analytics behind, the right support functions that we can have, and the right experiences as well for patients can help us crack the code on that. That's not an easy field. It's highly regulated. It takes a lot of things to come together, but that's something we're looking at it very closely. It's also the way we engage. So we have still 20,000 reps on the road right now across the world, making 100,000 visits of healthcare practitioners. And to many of you, it may seem a bit antiquated in many ways, but that's still a big part of the model. So we're trying to rethink that, but also at the same time making sure that we have the right tools in the hands of our reps so that when they are on the road, they can go and see the right doctors with the right content at the right time systematically. We have this live now in 11 countries across the world, our major ones, and starting to really make a dent in terms of impact on top line. It's also the way we engage with patients. And this is a great space for, I've seen some of from what I've heard, for some of the hacks happening over the weekend as well, some taking this on. We tend in pharma to just build website and app for whatever drug that we have in that capacity, instead of often going to who is better than us, who has created platforms where there are communities of patients already spending their time, who are getting really right and creating the right product experiences and the life depending on it. This is just an example. One of our drugs is called Aimovig in the context of migraine. There haven't been a drug for the last 15 years, highly stigmatized disease, patient often being seen as lazy and not showing up for work. And there are communities like Migraine Buddy. We've built 1.5 million very active patients spending their time on there. And every morning, waking up, having an agenda, declaring where in the cortex it's hitting them, how do they feel on a daily basis, and the impact it can have for them. 300,000 of those could be eligible for a drug. So trying to have bigger collaborations with those partners to really make the best of both worlds. We've done about 12 partnerships like those last year. In some cases, there are no communities existing. This is the case of sickle cell disease, which is a horrible blood disease, touching a lot of Black African American in the US, but across the world as well. And there, the team built up a community of patients to really give them a voice, to be able to make sure that they can tell their story, as opposed to us, pharma, telling them what to do on the back of it, with the side benefit that we can use their story as well to use that into the way we go to market more broadly. In Ghana, we have an access problem. Many of those drugs are not easily available. And so we are partnering with a company called Zipline, which is essentially drones to get the medicine at the right locations, almost in minutes, wherever you sit basically in the continent itself. It's also the way we operate. So this may seem less sexy to some extent, but we have 68 plants across the world. Historically, we've been using catalogs to buy, believe it or not, and each time localized in each of our different plans. Clearly, we can do better than that. What I like here is we have the team of entrepreneurs who saw that challenge inside, 7 people, ex-Flipkart guys, effectively build up a buying engine for us. We're in the midst of that right now, going and helping save tens and potentially hundreds of millions of dollars on the way that we are buying our different supplies for our chemists and for our manufacturing facilities as such. This is important because it allows us to reinvest those hundreds of millions of dollars back into research and back into the way we get our drug to market. So in closing, I'm just going back to the moon for a second and the moon exam from 1969, what was remarkable to me at that time was it required 400,000 people to come together after that big what if, that big sense of purpose and mission, and to break all the silos of what they had. And similarly, it required a huge political will from JF Kennedy and the administration at the time to really go and make that happen and capture the imagination. We're trying to think about it in the same way in our space. So the political will is certainly there in a significant way. We have decided to go big on data and digital. It's one of our 5 absolute priorities. Just to bring it to life, last week we had our top 300 leaders that we get once a year to go usually through strategic plans, strategic reviews, drug after drug, country after country. We decided to bypass all this and to do 3 days exclusively around data and digital. What does it mean to go big? How are we going to seriously put the right muscle and the right resource and make the hard calls to go after that? At the same time, it takes as well the 100,000 of us within Novartis to really pull in together. It requires a different ways of working, like a lot of what is happening here, to really go after that. And finally, that's why partly we are always interested to tell our story and to share that story. It takes the very best talent in the world and the best partners in the world and the best startups as well to help us go after that mission. I think it's a big mission, but it's probably going to be an incredible ride, and certainly over the next 5 to 10 years. But that's certainly the promise I can make to whoever is interested to help us on that journey, if you want to help us go and reimagining medicine powered by data and digital. Thank you very much.